And welcome, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo.
And part of the difficulty, if you study Aquinas directly, is the 5 ways are so concise. They're really summaries. And there's so many different interpretations on them that, and there's, of course, huge debate among Thomists of like how best to interpret them. Right. And there's some Thomists that feel that they can be completely reconstructed as is and successful, and there's other Thomists that say they need a lot of tweaking and work. So I think the better thing to do with Aquinas is get like an overview of his kind of grand metaphysical picture, which is this idea of sort of a participation metaphysics, where God is that perfect full plenitude of existence as such, and that anything else that exists, like we said before, is a sort of restricted active existence. It exists, but only in this way, only in this degree. It doesn't exist in virtue of what it is. So it's like existence with a set of minuses. And I think a good way to kind of think about this, I borrow this from Father Norris Clark, is if you imagine God kind of thinking the world into existence, which is analogous to how we think, right? God doesn't think like we think. But if you imagine, just for the sake of illustration, that he's thinking the world into existence, when he's creating things, he would think, okay, this exists and is like me, but only this much, or only in that way, or only to this degree. And I think that's a good way to just start to view how Aquinas' metaphysical picture of the world is in general. And his sort of master argument, I think, comes from, you don't find it in his 5 ways. You find it in the Diente.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because that is one argument that I think most people on a popular level never even heard of.
That's right.
His argument from Essence and Existence.
Mm-hmm. I think it is his master argument, and it gives you a sort of interpretive lens, if you will, to go back and then look at the 5 ways and say, okay, what did Aquinas really, what's the, and I think that's a good thing to do in philosophy is, you look at any philosopher and you not just try to interpret it charitably and say, okay, here's the best version of what I think he said, but then take it even further and say, what's the most that could be said of this? And I think that's a virtuous thing to do intellectually on any side of the debate, whether you're looking at arguments for God or against God. And Aquinas, we know, was great at that. Like he steel-manned his opponent's objections. Like he would state objections certainly stronger than you would typically find them paraded around today by most critics. And he'd be like, wow, how's he ever going to overcome this? And then he does.
Yeah, right.
So the argument from Essence and Existence, we can just kind of give a general sketch and then get into it.
Yeah.
Is really interesting because he doesn't start with like the principle of sufficient reason like we were doing before. Rather, he more or less proves a causal principle by starting with the things of everyday experience. And this is how his project of metaphysics typically works. You start with just some undeniable fact of experience, whether it is, say, change in the first way. Rather, for the famous Thomistic proof, he's starting from things like rocks or lions or cups or roast beef sandwiches, and he's recognizing something very important about these things. They exist, but they don't have to exist, and that their essence is really distinct from their act of existence. And we should probably give some definitions.
Yeah, I was
right?
going to say, what do you mean by essence?
So essence is the what of something, right? And we would typically say, just for whether people agree with this example or not, that what a human being is a rational animal, right? So the what of something would be its essence, and the fact that something is, we would say, is its existence or active existence. And what Aquinas is trying to get at is he's trying to show, again, for any finite limited thing, its essence is truly distinct from its active existence. And because of that, it must have existence imparted to it, not just when it came into existence, but ongoing, concurrently, for any moment that it exists. It is essentially borrowing existence. It has existence in a derivative way. And obviously, if that is true, if there really is a real distinction between essence and existence in any finite limited thing, this would demonstrate that all these things are caused to exist. And that eventually what you have to get back to is some first eternal cause whose essence just is existence. It doesn't borrow existence, but has existence in a sort of built-in way, right? That is the fullness of existence as such that can impart existence to any finite, limited essence out there. So that's a general sketch, and we can maybe unpack it a little bit if you want. But.
Yeah, that's my favorite methodology. Is let me give you the big picture, the map, and then we could get into all the nitty gritty. So okay, so that's the map. Let's get into the nitty gritty.
Sure. Okay. So why does Aquinas think that there is and when we say real distinction, we like there in mind independent objective reality, right? Okay. A distinction exists rather than say a conceptual distinction in how we just think about things, like whether this is half empty or half full, right? We're talking, or a bachelor and an unmarried man would be another example. We're talking about the same thing. It's just a conceptual distinction.
Right.
Aquinas wants to say, no, this is a real distinction. It's really there, just to be clear about that. And there's a couple lines of arguments that he gives and that have been sort of supported and promoted by contemporary Thomistic philosophers since, and I think they're good ones. One is very simple and intuitive, is that we can know the essence of something without knowing whether or not it exists. So an example that's typically given is, imagine that you meet an extremely sheltered person, and they've just never been out into the world before. Mm-hmm. And you describe to them the essences of, say, a lion, a pterodactyl, and a unicorn. I think this is actually the example that Dr. Fazer gives, so I'll borrow from him here. And then so you describe the essence of what these things are to this very sheltered person, and then you simply ask them, from a description of their essences, can you tell me which one of these exists now, which existed previously but is extinct, and which has never existed? And it seems very clear that without actually going out and looking at the world, empirical investigation, we would have no idea. So we can understand the essence of something without understanding its existence, which seems to imply pretty strongly that there's a real distinction here. Because if essence was really identical to the existence of something, then it should be included in our knowledge of its essence. Now, a way we can sort of further this and give a little, because some people debate when it comes to Aquinas whether this really proves the real distinction or not, or if it's his other later arguments. I think we can leave that open for now, but add one more layer of support, which would be this, to show that this is a real distinction, is that we can falsely judge about something's existence without misconceiving what it is, for example. So if take the overly sheltered person again, if he judges that lions don't exist, he's wrong, but he hasn't misconceived what a lion is. Mm-hmm. Whereas if he judges that a lion is say a dog, well, now he's got something fundamentally wrong about the essence of a lion. But that doesn't seem to be the case if we judge falsely about its existence, which again seems to really support that there's a real distinction between essence and existence, between these types of things. So that's the first line of support. The second one is the sort of everyday obvious thing that everything we come into contact